All right, I believe we have the tape on. Let's let it go just a second here to make sure it's past the leader tape, because too many times we've tried to record on the beginning of the tape and it just doesn't tape. But if you would begin up here at the top of the page, sir, and just give your name.
Full name?
Yes, sir.
Harlan F. Dale. Age 92. Highest rank of sergeant. In the Park Battery 3rd Corps Artillery Park. That was the name of the unit in which I served. And the date of my military service was May 31st, 1918 to June 26th, 1919. That was the length of my military service. So how did you enter the U.S. Army? And I enlisted because, like I said, I didn't want to wait for the draft.
Where did you enlist, sir?
Oklahoma City, right here in Oklahoma City.
Well, bless your heart. You're one of ours, then.
Yeah, I was born and raised here.
Where were you born, sir?
Down near Altus, Jackson County.
What's the date of your birth, sir?
August 24th, 1896.
Well, for goodness sake. And my first fellow that I get to talk to is an Oklahoman. That's wonderful. I'm pleased. Okay, and I think now we're on number 3. What did you do during your basic training?
Primarily we had close order drill, manual of arms, and I went to school of gas defense, poison gas defense, to get information for that. And then I was appointed after that was up at Camp Wadsworth. And after I went to the school, they appointed me as in charge of getting poison gas defense, because I was the only one that's been through the school.
Where did you take your training, sir?
First place we trained was Camp Jackson, South Carolina, right out of Columbia, and then went up to Camp Wadsworth, which was near Greenville, and further up in the northern part of South Carolina. Let's see, that covered what did you do during basic training. Like I said.
How good was the equipment that they issued? What sort of things did they give you when you first went in, and how good was it? What was the quality?
Well, we got what we got for rifles. I don't know. Most of the artillery units weren't issued rifles, but our commanding officer wanted them. But they issued us, I would have to say, inferior, because the Springfield was the official rifle. They didn't have enough of them. So they issued us Enfield rifles built on British. It was a British rifle built in Philadelphia. Eddystone Arms, an arms place in Philadelphia, made them. They weren't anything comparing efficiency to the Springfield. They were an English-made rifle.
I see. All right.
Our other equipment was adequate.
What sort of other things did they give you?
Well, most of what we were issued was our gas masks and helmets. Of course, they were pretty standard things. That was one thing that they were all pretty well up to a certain standard. And you were required that when you were in combat zone to have your helmet and your gas mask within reach at all times, even at night. You had to have them so that you could reach them. That was one of the basic rules. Gas mask and helmet at all times when you're in the combat zone.
I can well imagine that was completely necessary. When you were in your basic training, sir, how often what sort of training did they give you with the masks? And because before you went in, I'm sure you didn't use that sort of equipment. But what sort of things did they do to teach you how to use these things? The gas mask and about the gas.
The gas mask put down over your face, and they gave me special training. And if you had to say lift a corner to give orders or something, specifics of how you do that. In other words, they would tell you, don't ever inhale when your mask is open. You exhale, but never inhale, because exhaling, then you would blow out any of the gas that had seeped in, and that was the basis of the training. And I tried to pass the training on to the men, and that was my job.
That's interesting. Okay, I think the next question here was, how good was the leadership during your basic training period? I mean, did they teach you well? Or?
Well, they did as good a job as they could with the time. The time element was against us.
How long did you train? I mean, how long was your basic training period?
I went in the latter part of May, and we sailed for France on the 5th of August. We didn't have enough time. There was a nucleus of 65 men that were picked because they gave an examination, and they picked the 65 top men and sent them up to Camp Wadsworth, and then they brought in a new draft. And we were supposed to train them and get them ready. Didn't give us enough time to get them properly trained. And one of my jobs was to be a kind of a buffer between the men and the commanding officer. I think the title is personnel non-com. In other words, if anybody wanted to see the commanding officer, had to see me first. And I'd find out what they wanted, and if I thought it was important enough, then I'd set up a page for them to
sort of screen the complaints.
Yeah, that's right. And the next job he gave me was to give him a list of the men that we were going to have to leave behind because they were not sufficiently trained for combat service. I turned in 63 names. Men I considered needed further training. And
what did they do with those men? Did they send them back through training?
They sent them to what they call the development battalion. And I only made recommendations. I didn't make the decision. The commanding officer made the decision from my recommendations. But he only overruled me on one man out of 63.
That's an excellent record. That development battalion, was it located on your base, or did they send them to another base?
Well, I think they were sent, most of them, back, I guess, to Camp Jackson, which was the big camp down near Columbia. I think from where we were up in the northern part of South Carolina, I think they sent them, most of them, back down to Camp Jackson for further training.
Okay, I think we've covered everything pretty well down to number 6 here about your unit and your specific jobs, because you've told us a lot about that. Number 6 says, describe your movement overseas and any more training that you had while you were there.
We went by way of Liverpool, England, and Le Havre, France, and then down to Angoulême, to what they call Organization and Training Center number 5. It's down near Bordeaux, in the wine country. We were supposed to get further training there.
Did you get further training there?
Well, what happened was that we got down there, and there was a flu epidemic. 60% of the men had the flu all at one time. We didn't have a hospital. They filled the civilian hospitals, 2 of them in the town. When they got down to me, I was one of the last ones. They had to put me down in the stables
Oh my goodness.
They didn't have any horses. Originally, it was an old French barracks, all built of stone. And they had stables for the horses, but no horses. So they turned the stables into a hospital.
How many men were stationed there in that area, sir? Do you have any idea?
Oh, I'd say about a little better than 1,500 probably.
And of that 1,500, how many of those men came down with the flu?
Well, it said about 60%.
Oh my. And how many of those men did they lose?
The total loss come to about 30% of the original strength. They lost.
What did they do to treat the flu? What sort of methods and medicine, what did they do for you guys when you came down with the flu?
Well, it depended on the flu affects people in different ways. Now, in my case, instead of having a high temperature, my temperature was low, and they had to give me heart stimulants.
I see. Did they have to get an additional medical staff? Did they have enough people, trained people there to help you all?
Well, they were short of medical help. They had two of our own doctors for our outfit, and then some more officers from the Coast Artillery that were also stationed there. But they really were short of help. They didn't have any nurses. All they had was, hospital orderlies, male hospital orderlies.
Do you have any idea the number of personnel in that medical unit?
Oh, they had about, I'd say, 50 or 60 hospital orderlies and maybe 4 or 5 doctors. We had 2 doctors at our outfit, and I think they had 2 or 3 besides that.
What sort of special arrangements did you all have to set up, and I'm sure you did, for those boys that did not survive the flu? Did you have to set aside a barracks until the bodies could be taken care of or sent home, or what was the procedure?
Well, I don't really know what the procedure was, for that was a died day. Some of them may have been sent home, but usually, if you died, unless your family wanted you sent home, they would be buried wherever it was that they died. Eventually, they were all moved to one cemetery up in northern France. The French deeded over a lot of land for a central burial place up near the German border.
Well, once they got you over that flu, where did they send you?
They sent us first up to one of the, I can't remember the name of the place right now, but they didn't keep us there because we had been delayed so long that they had already taken that particular vantage point, so where they needed us was over in the New Sargon sector. So we went from there over to New Sargon and put in the rest of the war there.
I see. And how long was that? How long a period of time was that?
Well, we went up there sometime in October. It wasn't a very long period, but actually about 18 days.
And what did you do when you were up there? I mean, what was your...
We got up, we were a field artillery outfit, but where the weakness was, where they needed people the most, was in moving ammunition from the railhead up to the advanced position. So what they did, we relieved the 316th Ammunition Train, where their equipment and the personnel was in pretty bad shape. So we relieved them and took over their duties. which was supply parts of the First Army. And was right up near where Sergeant York captured 104 Germans. It was just a few miles from where we established our base there at Varennes.
From the railhead up to where you had to deliver the ammunition, about how far, how many miles, or what sort of distance were you guys having to travel?
Well, the problem was that they had a railroad that went up along followed the river, but the Germans had blown everything up, and it would take too long to replace the railroads. They of course blew the bridges, which they could replace in a few hours, you know, with pontoons or so on. But the ammunition had to be moved by truck from the railheads up to the advanced position. And it was a relay system. A fleet of trucks would bring ammunition up to Varennes, which was the base. And then from there, other truck convoys would pick up ammunition, take it on further up to another advanced position, so on. So they were moving all the time, and they left the base at Varennes, but they established other ammunition dumps along the way. The last one was where they sent me to take charge of the advanced position of the ammunition dump. It was right up near General Liggett's headquarters. General Liggett was the commanding officer of the First Army. And where they sent me was just about a quarter of a mile from the post of command. And I was up there till the end of the war.
How many men did you have?
61.
Oh my goodness.
61 men in this crew that handled the ammunition stuff. I was responsible for them. I had to feed them, house them, send them to the hospital if they got sick. The commanding officer took me up there, told me what to go to the ordnance officer who would brief me on what I was supposed to do. He said, I've got to leave, so it's all up to you. These men are your responsibility now. You take charge of them, and you have to. And remember, nobody else can give them orders but you. You're the only one that has any authority over them. The ordnance officer will brief you, but he can't give orders to your men. You have to do that. That's the way the setup was. And of course, it caused sudden dissatisfaction because the officers coming up would say, one of them would say, I've got a priority. So I had to decide whether to honor the priority. And it just wasn't possible to do that because if you start running a convoy ahead of somebody there, then they're going to be dissatisfied. So I just made a hard and fast rule: no priority. You bring them up in order. And then some of the officers went down and complained to the ordnance officer that I had overruled them. And they didn't get very far. He never did mention it to me, but the orderly said that he told them, don't bother me with your problems, I got my own. In effect, that's what he said.
Where you were taking care of all of these things, did you and your men, you have to do any shooting, any fighting? Were you in combat?
No. We were taking care of the ammunition. That was our sole purpose. We had to, what I had to do was supervise loading, unloading, and stockpiling. Because everything had to be piled so that you could reach, you know just where it was, even if you didn't have any light. See, they were so close, they didn't want lights that might betray the position of the dump to the German Air Force. So we didn't show any lights. I had to work mostly in the dark.
Well, how did you arrange those things so that you knew by feel what you were?
Well, in a certain position, it'd be one pile here would be 6-inch howitzer, 6-inch. Next pile maybe would be 6-inch field rifle. Then we'd have one pile of French 75, which is easy to identify because they're put up in boxes. The others are just loose projectiles, and they'd come. Trucks would come up to take ammunition up to the guns themselves, and they'd have an order so many 6-inch howitzers, 6-inch field rifle, or whatever it was. I had to know right where everything was, so that I could direct the men to load.
I just wondered that since ammunition is very important when you're fighting a war, whether you had to, whether the enemy ever tried to attack you all or destroy the stores.
They bombed, tried to bomb me. They could have located it, but one thing, it rained a lot, and they didn't have very clear skies. They didn't have any bomb sights, you know. It was all hit or miss. The northern bomb sights came in World War II. They never had it in World War I.
That's true.
And they weren't very accurate with their bombing.
Well, that was a fortunate thing for you all.
Yeah. They come close a couple of times, but they never did hit the ammunition dump, which was a good thing for us. If they ever hit that dump, it would have blown everybody out to Kingdom Come, you know.
How about the civilians in the country, you know, where you were there in France? How did you all get along with them? Did you have any problem with the civilians? Were they friendly to you, or?
The French civilians that I dealt with when I was on, of course I didn't see anything of them until after the war was over, and I went on furlough down in southern France, the French Riviera. I had a furlough down there. The French people that I was in contact with are almost invariably friendly and helpful. They tried to help me all they could. They were very friendly to me, and what few English that I met, of course, we were only in England a few days. They were also friendly and helpful. To me, some of the men complained that they didn't get along too well, but I always got along fine with the civilian population of England and France. I didn't see very many English.
They seemed to be glad that you boys were there then.
Yeah, even the English, you could tell when we unloaded in Liverpool and took the train over to Southampton, there was crowds of mostly women, you know, widows and wives of the men that were fighting. They were all out, glad to see us, hoping we'd put an end to the war, which we did finally. Took a little longer than they figured.
Well, let me see. We talked about your unit's combat activities and what you did. Now let's move down here to number 9, and it says, please describe a typical day when you were not up front. When you went on leave. What'd you do when you went on leave? And where'd you go?
Well,
can you tell me that?
First place I went, when I left at night, I took the night train into Paris. And I wasn't supposed to go that route. See, they were paying my transportation. They had a military train that we were supposed. Oh, wait a minute, I better pay you.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right.
Oh, thanks. And but when I went on that leave, I only spent one day in Paris. I got in there early in the morning, and then the military police told me I would have to get down to the river here. I'd have to go down to the Gare de Lyon and take a train on the PL&M, Paris, Lyon, and Mediterranean. from Paris to Rome. So I spent the day there in Paris and then took a bus down to the other station and went from there down as far as Marseille. But the military police come on the train in Marseille, told me I didn't have any business being on that train. I was supposed to ride the military train. So they took me off of there, and I had to lay over a day and catch the next military train down to the Riviera, which is just down the coast from Marseille, not very far. I was had a hotel reservation at the Windsor, which is a rather small hotel away from the beach. And then sitting in an orange grove, and that's where I was assigned. See, the Army was paying my hotel bill also, transportation and the hotel bill, but I spent a lot of time in some of the other towns on my own expense.
When you went into Paris, say for example, what was the condition of Paris at that time? What did you see? What did it look like? I mean,
it was crowded with soldiers on leave, with YMCA. They had several hotels taken over. Conditions were very crowded.
Was there any war damage? You know, to Paris?
There was some war damage from the Big Bertha, but it didn't take in a very large area. It did some damage. That was a big gun that shot 28 miles, something like that. I hit a few places there in Paris, but I didn't see much of that. But I just went,
Did you see any of Marseille?
Oh yes, I saw quite a bit of it. I had to lay over there 24 hours.
Was there any damage there, or what did Marseille look like?
Well, it's an old city and a lot of old buildings, narrow streets, and there's a typical city of the older cities, Part of Paris is the same thing. I went down to the old Latin Quarter in Paris, and those are all old buildings that were built before there was any other Paris. You go down Boulevard Strasbourg, and the Arch of St. Denis was where the old gate to the city was when it was a walled city. And that's the old Latin Quarter. I spent a few hours in there just to see what it was like.
Was Marseille crowded like Paris was?
Yeah,
were there a lot of people there?
Full of refugees. They hadn't all gotten back yet when I was down there. And Marseille was crowded. It was about double its normal population. Most of the refugees from the war zone.
What about the Riviera? What condition was it in, and was it crowded
Well, it
too?
was a little different. It was in the winter, and that's the season when the French and other English all come for the winter, because it's warm there in the winter.
Were they still coming even in wartime?
Well, the war was over.
Oh, okay.
See, I didn't get on any furlough until after the war was over.
You stayed right where you were until after
Yeah,
after
we
the
stayed
armistice.
up in the war zone for several months. I supervised the repair of roads and bridges, supervised the restoration of a water power electric plant. The day of commanding officer called me in, told me this water power plant down here is all run down. The Germans, I guess, never used it. But I want you to go down there and get some men and put it back in operation. He knew I didn't know anything about water power, but he also knew that I knew somebody that did. So I went and got a couple of young electrical engineers that I happen to know. One of them from both of them had degrees in electrical engineering. So I took them down there and I said, well, here's the plan. Now you're supposed to put this back in operation. You make out a list of the material you need to do it, and I'll get the material. So they made out a list of everything they needed. They looked it over. It actually looked worse than it really was. So I went across the river to engineering, Lieutenant Colonel in charge. I go into his office. I said, I got a list of material that I have to get from somewhere. And I'll make you a deal. If you get me the material, I'll have them string a line over here and furnish you with electric power for our side of the river, and see if it's on the Air River. And we'll have power for you also. So he said, you got a deal. Give me that list. By 6 o'clock that night, he had the material there. In 3 days, they had the plant operating.
3 days?
Commanding officer sent down a letter of commendation for, said, just how they put it, the sergeant in charge of this project displayed great ingenuity and resourcefulness. My commanding officer said, I think what he means is you're an accomplished thief.
Well, didn't you have to be sometimes?
Oh, yeah. I saw something I wanted or that I needed. One time I loaded up 5 truckloads of vegetables from a truck farm up in northern France, hauled them back down to our outfit. 5 truckloads of carrots, beets. Just as I got 5 trucks loaded, some staff officer come down a narrow road there, and jumped out of the car, and who's in charge of these trucks? And I said, I am, sir. And he said, who gave you the authority to come down here and get these things from this truck farm? I said, sir, if you have any complaints to make, you'll have to complain to my commanding officer. I'm carrying out his instructions. He stood there a minute like he didn't quite know what to say. He said, well, I think he might have done me the courtesy of calling me up. Got in the car and drove off.
Well, did your men enjoy all those vegetables?
Oh, yeah. The vegetables we didn't get very often, you know.
What sort of things, what kind of food did you all eat on a regular basis? What did you
When we were up in the combat zone, it had to be all, we didn't have any refrigeration. We didn't have fresh milk. It had to be canned milk, and most everything had to be something that didn't have to be refrigerated. Corned beef and corned beef hash. We got pretty tired of that. And once in a while we'd get fresh beef. The commanding officer somehow would get a hold of fresh beef, and we'd have steak.
Oh my.
But not too often.
Tell me, do you still eat corned beef hash?
No. Not anymore. I haven't eaten any corned beef hash in a long time.
I imagine you had enough while you were over there, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Number 10 question here says, how was the morale in your unit? How did your men feel about where they were, and did it change after combat? But of course, you said you weren't in much of that. But
well, they weren't very well satisfied. You know, their morale at times got pretty low. They were homesick. The thing you have to face with men like that is that they're not really soldiers. They're just civilians in uniform, and they're not used to being separated from their families, and they weren't too well satisfied.
did any of them express a desire to be in combat rather than where they were, or rather than going home?
Well, we had some that were good soldiers. I wouldn't say they really preferred to be in combat, but they were perfectly willing to be in combat. some good men, and then we had a lot of men that complained all the time. Complained about practically anything you want to mention.
From the time that you were sent there with these 61 men, did you ever have any changes in personnel? Or did you ever have to replace men? Or did you have the same men all
Well, same men. They didn't have any replacements to give us because they had sent 56 replacement out to find us. They didn't find us until after the war was over.
That doesn't help, does it?
Right in the middle of the night, the 56 replacements came in December, a month after the war was over. And I had to find houses for them. And it wasn't easy in those shot-up towns, you know, to find places for everybody to live in. In the middle of the night, especially.
I can imagine. Number 11 says, to what extent did the supplies you needed reach you, and what did you think of your rations? And we've discussed the food here somewhat, but did you have any other problems with any other kind of supplies? Did you have any difficulty getting that ammunition where you were supposed to, or any of the other equipment you were supposed to?
Well, we got up there late enough that they were pretty well supplied. There was a shortage of ammunition and a shortage of support for the infantry in the early days of right after they broke through the old Hindenburg line there at Varennes, what he called the impregnable Hindenburg line. But they broke through it on the 27th of September. And they started moving. Yeah, well, once they broke through it, they started moving a few days at a time, right up towards the German border, right up towards the Meuse River. See, the Meuse River was the boundary. You crossed the Meuse River in German territory. As soon as we crossed the Meuse River, the Germans threw in the towel.
Did you yourself ever see the Germans or see a German soldier or have any?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, tell me.
Hundreds of them.
Did you have any personal contact with any of them?
Oh, yes. They used to come down. There'd be 200 or 300 of them and were captured and sent down with maybe one sergeant in charge of them. And they were, I think most of them were glad they were captured so they get a square meal and maybe some decent clothes.
Did you have to provide for them too?
Oh, yeah. They were provided for the same as anybody else. They were sent to prison camps for new clothing and some of them after the war was over, when we were repairing roads and bridges, they sent some of them up for me to work them. Usually with an officer that spoke English along with them. They'd have an interpreter.
And they would build some roads and bridges?
Well, they did repair work mostly. The bridges are all blown up, you know. The roads were badly blown up too. They had to be repaired. There was a lot of repair work to be done. And then we had one unit that didn't do anything but clean up the battlefield. You know, the duds that didn't go off, those all had to be taken out, moved to a central location and destroyed. We had one unit that did that.
And those were German prisoners that did that?
No, not the German prisoners wasn't required to do that.
Oh, I see. I was going to say, that seems kind of strange, but did you have, in cleaning up the battlefields and taking these shells that had not been exploded, did you have any very bad things happen? Did any of those things go off?
Well, what happened was we weren't supposed to destroy them. Our job was to get them to a central location all together, see, clean up the battlefield and pile them up, and then the detonation men who were experts at that came along and detonated them. We only had one accident. The man was killed. I don't know just what happened, but there was a hill and some piece of one of these big shells come over and hit one of the men that was working on the other side in the head, killed him. That's the only accident that we had. while they were cleaning up the battlefield.
That's phenomenal, especially when you're handling light
Yeah.
ammunition.
Well, they had experts. They were supposed to know their business. They just had that one accident that went further than they anticipated, I guess.
Let me clarify something right here. I think maybe I don't understand. You mentioned something that we were talking about the German prisoners, and I thought I understood you to say that some of those men worked on the bridges and roads. Did you use them for that?
I use them occasionally, yes. They would send a group of them down from the prisoner of war camp, usually with an interpreter, and I'd tell him what they were to do. And
that's what I thought I understood you to say. I just wanted to clarify that.
And he'd tell them.
What was the largest group of German prisoners? Do you remember the largest group that you worked with at one time that you ever had?
We never had more than about 30 at a time.
Were they good workers? Did they?
Oh, they worked. We didn't work them too hard. They worked about the same as our own men did. Our own men didn't work very hard either.
Now I want to ask you one question before we go on to the rest of this. We were talking about the shells, the dud shells that did not explode, and of course you were using all of this other military issue material and your gas masks and things. What was the quality of that equipment? Did it work always the way it was supposed to work? Did you have a real problem with quality in the equipment and in the ammunition, the manufacturer?
Well, we didn't have any trouble with the ammunition. The problem was getting the ammunition to where they needed to get it.
I see.
It was good quality. Once they got the ammunition going, the guns would go practically day and night. The ammunition, I guess, by that time was very good quality.
Did it take you long to get used to the gunfire, the fire of the big guns?
Yeah, you got to where you hardly noticed it. You noticed it more when it stopped. We've been used to hearing the guns all night, and pounding away. At 11 o'clock in the morning, and not only the guns, but the planes were flying, 75, 100 of them at a time, in the air, and dog fights going on. And all of a sudden, there were no planes flying, no guns firing, no nothing. Just a kind of eerie silence. And
I can well imagine that it was.
And we didn't have any advance warning. Nobody had said anything. And the higher officers, they must have known, but they didn't say anything. We didn't have anything official until 6 o'clock that evening. And we never had any retreat formations while the war was going on. But they called a special retreat formation, and the commanding officer then read the dispatch from General Pershing. And I'll never forget the first sentence. The enemy has capitulated. That's how he started it off.
I'm sure that all the other guys like you never forgot that sentence either. Best news you ever heard.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember thinking, well, now I can go home. That was one of the funny ones. I didn't get home until the next spring. Stayed there all winter.
Okay, we've discussed a lot of this stuff, so let's skip down here to number 17. Since we were talking about the enemy soldiers, because we talked about your equipment and your leadership and all of that. But let's talk about the enemy soldier for a second. How good a soldier was he?
Well,
How well equipped was he, too?
The enemy soldiers originally, the old German army was a fine army and well equipped. The ones that we faced there towards the end of the war, though, were the old men, 60 years old, young boys, 16. They were like anybody else. They weren't soldiers, they were just civilians in uniform. And it appeared to me when they kept bringing them down all the time, down the road that come right by the ammunition dump, that they were kind of glad they got captured. They'd get a square meal and some decent clothes.
Did you ever get to know any of them personally? Did you ever talk to any of them?
Oh yeah, I talked to some of them as they come down, and a few of them that spoke English. And,
did they have any comment to make about what they, you know?
No, they didn't talk about the war. I think they were glad to, like the rest of us, that it was over.
I'm sure. Number 18, what do you recall about November 11th, 1918, and how did you react to hearing about the armistice? And we just talked about that announcement.
Yeah,
Can you remember precisely what was going on that day?
it was a day just like any other. The trucks came in early in the morning, and I had them unloaded and stockpiled. Nobody said anything. We didn't anticipate anything. See, the way we operated, in the early morning when the trucks brought ammunition in to replace what we'd used the night before, actually, I had to turn in a list of what we shipped out during the night, early in the morning. And then the ordnance officer, it was his job to get replacement material, ammunition there for the next night's run. And they were coming in just as usual that morning. And he hadn't said anything to me when I was down there with my daily report. Didn't say anything about that, an armistice. I guess he didn't know. And then at 11 o'clock, like I said, everything stopped. No more planes flying, no more guns firing, no more nothing.
What was your first thought?
First thought was, I wonder if it's going to last. Wonder when they'll start up again.
And then, how long after that? You said you didn't know until like 6 o'clock that evening.
Yeah,
they made the announcement.
And they read the dispatch from General Pershing.
And the silence continued from 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
As the day grew on and the silence continued, what did you think? And what did you think was happening? Or do you have any thought about that? Any memory about that?
Well, after a few hours and nothing happened, they began to dawn on me that probably it's over.
At least you were hoping.
Maybe it's over.
And then you got the good word that it was.
Yeah, we got the word direct from headquarters.
Number 19, what were your opinions of the enemy then and today? How did you feel about those folks, the Germans? How did you feel about fighting those men? Since you did have some contact with them too, other than just the contact.
No, not direct contact. See, the artillery, it's set up to destroy a whole platoon or a whole company with one salvo. You don't have much direct combat. What happens is they soften everything up with heavy artillery barrages, then they send the infantry in. And of course the final result, always as usual, in those days had to be settled with the good old slogging doughboy with his rifle, bayonet, and hand grenade. They made the final assault after the Air Force and after the artillery had supported him, knocked out as much as they could. Then he had to go in and finish it up.
By the time the war was over, did you feel any differently about being there than you did when you went in?
No, I didn't feel any different. I had a pretty good idea what it was like before I ever went. I knew, like Sherman said, war is hell. I didn't expect it to be any soft spot. I knew it would be maybe a lot of hard fighting. And it was a lot of hard fighting. Of course, I didn't do any direct fighting, but took 8 men behind the line to keep 1 man in the front line.
That's true, and without you, they couldn't have done what they had to do on the front line.
That was their one trouble, was getting the ammunition up there, because these big 10-ton trucks had to haul it from the railhead, and those French roads just weren't built for that heavy traffic, and the roads were terrible. And it rained all the time, practically all the time. That didn't help any. And moving that ammunition up in 10-ton trucks was quite a chore. We had 5 truck companies working on it, and it was all they could do. The roads were pitted with shell holes. It was terrible terrain to get over.
What about after the war was over, after the armistice was signed? Were you ever in any part of Germany before you came home?
No.
They sent you over there? Okay.
No, we were slated to go up to the Army of Occupation, but they rescinded the order because by that time our equipment was in pretty bad shape. It had been used all the time during, and it all had to due to be overhauled, most of it. And the personnel was about 30% short, so they decided not to send us up to the Army of Occupation. I think they sent mostly the 3rd Army up under General Dixon.
How long after the armistice was signed did they send you home? How long before they sent you home?
I left France the day before Memorial Day the next spring.
You were there a little while longer then.
Yeah, oh yeah.
What happened? What were you doing from the time that the armistice was signed until the time that they sent you home?
Well, like I said, we repaired roads, bridges, cleaned up the battlefield. We had to go out and get our wood supply to keep our cooking and eating going in there. It was pretty heavy timbered Argonne forest was, and we go out into the forest to get mostly dead trees, bring in. It took practically every day we sent out a wood detail, and then we'd get supplies shipped in to Verdun, where the railroad was. We'd send a truck up there and haul those back down. Unfortunately, some of the men hauled some things down there they wasn't supposed to.
What sort of things were those?
Well, the thing I remember most was the 50-gallon hogshead of wine.
Oh, those sort of
It
things.
was sitting on the platform, and I sent them up there to get some motor supplies that had come in from Dijon. Dijon was the main supply fleet. They'd sent it up to Verdun. We were just 8 miles out of Verdun. I sent a truck up there. They brought back the supplies, and I happened to notice that my men were drunk most of the time. Where the hell are they getting liquor? I mean, the towns weren't operating. They didn't have liquor stores or anything. They got liquor to get somewhere to get drunk. So I kept scouting around, finally the building where the front part wasn't quite destroyed, but the back part, the timbers had all fallen. They took the hogs of the line back in behind and set it up, and then they take their tin cups, aluminum cups, back there and get a cup of wine.
Where did they get the wine? Was it from a farm or a winery?
Sitting on the railroad platform, supposed to be shipped to somebody, I guess.
They just lifted it, huh?
Yeah, they just loaded it up along with their own supplies.
I see.
As soon as I located it, I went to the commanding officer, told him, I said, my men stole 50-gallon hogshead of wine. You're going to have to do something about it.
When they sent you back in the United States, where did they send you to, and what was where were you discharged?
They sent us from Brest to Newport News, Virginia.
And that's where you were discharged?
No,
what happened
they
there?
split up the outfit there. They sent part of them up to Camp Devens, the New Englanders, and from Pennsylvania they went north. And then I had to wait about 10 days till they made up a load of people going west. And they sent me all the way out to Camp Pike, Arkansas. That's where I was discharged.
How long were you at Camp Pike before they finally discharged you?
About a week. A little less than a week.
Did you have to go through medical exams and all sorts of things before they let you?
Get the paperwork done, you know, and get our $60. And we had a couple of months back pay, usually.
Well, we just have a couple of questions and we'll be through. Number 21 says, how did you feel right after leaving the Army about your service? And how have you felt about it since? Have your feelings changed about it?
Well, I didn't think too much about it. It was just something you had to do. And the way I felt about it, you just had to go in there and do the best you could. Give them the best that you had in you.
How old were you, sir, when you were discharged from the Army?
I was discharged in I was 23.
You did a lot of work and had a lot of heavy responsibility for a young man.
Yeah,
My
I was
goodness.
only 21 when I went in. And in less than a month, in about a month, well, I went in about the 1st of June. And in 2 months, they promoted me to sergeant. And I was a section chief. And we were organized in an artillery outfit, but motorized. We were supposed to pull our guns and caissons with trailer hitches behind our trucks, our 5 truck companies. We never did get to fulfill our, because of the delays. We left 5th of August. It took us 19 days. We had to go up to New York Harbor and make up part of a convoy, and then up to Halifax, Nova Scotia, and get the rest of the convoy. Then 22 ships of us went across, landed in Liverpool. And
how about the boys going over? Were they seasick? Did you all have trouble with that?
Some of them couldn't keep anything on their stomachs for the whole time across. They almost starved to death.
How many days did it take you all to get to England? How long?
19 days.
Oh, Lord. Oh, my.
By the time we got them made, they picked up the rest of our convoy. That's what delayed it. It took us 19 days from the time we sailed the 5th of August, and we landed in Liverpool on my birthday, the 24th of August.
That was a great birthday present, wasn't it?
And we went from there to Northampton and then across the channel to Le Havre down to Angeline.
When you left the Army, sir, did you have any difficulty going back into civilian life?
Well, I wouldn't say I had difficulty. The only thing was my father bought a small ranch. He wanted me to help him run it, but I'd been gone so long he had to get somebody else to help him run it, and there wasn't really anything for me to do until that year was over, because it was already into the summer, you know. So I just had to get whatever work I could find.
Was that difficult? Did you have a difficult time?
Well, to begin with, it was easy right in the midst of the harvest season. Harvest wheat. I went and started fishing wheat in the threshing machines, different places around. I followed it up north into Kansas,
You learned all that before you went in the Army, or did you pick up that skill when you were in the Army?
No, I didn't have anything to do with the mules in the Army. I learned it before I went.
You learned that before you were 21.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can handle any kind of a horse or mule.
Down there in that part of the country where you were born, I guess so.
Oh, yeah. We raised mules on the farm. And I broke them every spring. I was used to breaking mules to work. Actually, they're a lot easier to break than a horse is, because they're not as nervous.
They're sometimes more intelligent, too, aren't they? Mules.
Yeah, they're... But one thing about a mule, he ain't going to do anything to hurt himself. A horse is liable to run through a wire fence, but not a mule. He'll stop before he gets there.
Let me ask you one last question, and then I'm going to let you go and rest. I think I've talked your ear off here. The last question here deals with the effect of your military service on the rest of your life. Did you find that your military service had an impact on the rest of your life? Some influence or other?
Well, one thing I got used to in the military service, it may sound strange, but I got used to shaving every day. I never used to until I got into the Army. But you had to keep yourself looking, it was your fresh uniform, freshly shaved, all that was part of your military setup. The way they had you set up, you're supposed to be neat at all times. That kind of held over. I still shave every other day, and every day.
Well, fantastic. Are there any other things that you've noticed, or anything that has clung to you or stayed with you as a result of your experiences in the Army?
The only thing that stayed with me, I have chronic bronchitis that I picked up when I had the flu, I guess. It's been with me all the time. Never seems to get much better. And also, the VA examined me in 1930, right here in Oklahoma City. And they told me I had chronic colitis, a chronic condition of the lower bowel, lower intestine. It's been with me all my life.
And I'm sure that the military, when you were trying to deal with all of that stress and pressure over the ammunition and all of that stuff, when you were over there in the combat zone, didn't help that at all, did it?
No, and then the diet it brought on a lot of, I guess what they call gingivitis now. A lot of them lost their teeth. I lost mine in 1938, all of them. The diet wasn't conducive to good dental work. I mean, you didn't have enough fresh vegetables or fresh milk, all those things while you were in, especially up in the combat zone, you didn't get any of that. And it showed up on a lot of, the VA told me that, for instance, that the chronic colitis was 6 times as frequent in World War I veterans as it was in the other population.
That's an interesting statistic.
So I guess
it's a terrible statistic.
I guess it comes from the diet.
Yes.
Mostly.
Well, sir, I want to thank you so much for talking to me and letting us put this preliminary stuff on this tape. So now you sort of know that they're going to ask you all these things again when they put you on television. So,
yeah, I suppose that they've got my copy. I made a copy
Or they'll go down it and they'll ask you the same things I ask you, and you'll have to do this all over again. But I want to thank you so much, sir, for your help on this. So I'm going to turn this thing off right now.